Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 90, so tail end, almost at a part 100. I'm really curious if actually we'll get there, but anyway, part 90 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We'll be taking a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We haven't got that many. I don't think we actually have any dinosaurs today, so that's interesting. We got a lot of reptiles, but we've got some very interesting animals. No dinosaurs today, but excited to get stuck into this one anyway. So we're going to be starting off today with Bulbasaurus, done by That One Glitch and Trippy28. So we've got this cute little guy here. Let's see if we can get him in a good light. I'll have a look at this one over here, I think. Now you look quite cute. So this is Bulbasaurus. So Bulbasaurus, which means bulbous reptile. These guys are an extinct genus of Dinosaurs, which is known from the Longonian epoch of the late Permian. So, and it contains the type species Bulbasaurus Helicoprion, did we say that, or Phyloxyron? And it formerly was considered to be belonging to a genus called Tropistoma, but there were a lot of differences in its morphology that justified calling it another species, and has been reclassified as the earliest member of the family Gonichidae, which is very interesting group of Dinosaurs. So it's quite a big group. They include animals like Palamodon and like Solarcephalodons, a lot of different Dinosaurs, and is the only member of its group known from the Tropistoma assemblage zone, which is a zone in where it was found. So this is probably the South African like Elliott Formation, things like that. So it's big, the Karoo supergroup, which is a very interesting group. And even though people were thinking, it's in the media when it was announced, it was kind of Bulbasaur, Bulbasaur Pokemon. It was actually not named for Bulbasaur the Pokemon. It is not directly named after that Pokemon, but rather is actually its nasal bones. So you can see there's big nasal bones. You can see that big on the head there. That really gives it its name. However, it was described noted that the similarity in name is not entirely coincidental. So additionally, the species name is actually, which is Bulbasaurus Phyloxyron, which means leaf raiser, which is most directly a reference to its keratin covered jaws, so it has a big beak. And other distinguishing characters that has a very hook-like beak, very large tusks, and the absence of bossing on the prefrontal bone. So the holotype of this guy was found by Roger M.H. Smith and the Verus locality in Fransenburg, Northern Cape, South Africa, which is known as the Tropistoma assemblage zone, which is from the Upper Permian, and is named after the Orletodont Tropistoma, which is common at the site. So a lot of those sites down there are named of the species that are most common in certain strata, so or certain layers of rock. So that was the most common species, or one of the more common species in that layer of rock. So hence the name. It's the assemblage group. So if they're found in that level of rock, it's that species group. And the holotype itself, which is characterized as SAMPK-K1111 or 11235, as a partially complete skull that was found in grey siltstone, and is actually not associated with the rest of the skeleton, so it's really only a head. But there are other specimens that have been found, like including some complete skulls and some post-cranial remains as well, so it is quite well known. And all of them are either held in the Ejoku Museum in Cape Town or the Council of Geoscience in Victoria. And before referring to the genus, it was really just considered specimens of Tropistoma. But then it was described by Christian, Karma, and Smith in 2017 with a name, as I mentioned, the big bosses on its head, and is derived, as I already mentioned that before. Even though it is published, did not reference the Pokemon, but if one wished to lead the lines of installment. So you can see there's a lot of similarities with Bulbasaur itself. It looks a lot like Bulbasaur, with a big head and things like that. So even if it was unintentional, it's still a cool little reference. It shows how things up like that. But yeah, there's very interesting characteristics to it. And actually, most skulls of the species is cool as well. Are about 13 to 16 centimeters, or about 5 to 6 inches, with two skulls being smaller than that. So the larger skulls are generally believed to be mature specimens, and while some smaller ones are potentially good to be decompression, but other specimens have like a shorter, less hooked out. So we do have a bit of an ontogenetic series, and we actually see the similarities with the features that are with other young types or other species of Dicynodonts related to it, such as Ambucephalodon. So we think they are part of a growth series of some younger and older individuals, which is quite cool. And in terms of classification, as I mentioned, it's part of the Duicidae individuals, which is closest relative being Encephalodon, Allocephalodon. And though it is quite basal in there, it is the Genitocalia. And we know that they have kind of two distinct morphs. So we know that there's a morph with a short snout and large tusks, and one with a long snout and short tusks, which actually believed to be sexual dimorphism. So we do have, and this is a trend seen in other Dicynodonts, so it's pretty safe to say that it is sexual dimorphism. However, it matches Bulbasaurus, matches neither of these homologies, which is interesting. So it could be, a bit of individual variation, or potentially maybe different species, but I won't be so sure on that. So yeah, very interesting to see what that comes to. But we're going to talk about a little bit the habitat it lived in. From the Tropistoma assemblage zone, where it came from, is named after the Osteodontid Tropistoma, and the third most common Dicynodont in the assemblage. And most common is a small Diactodon. If you guys know Diactodon, it's quite a famous one. Lived in there. And it had quite an interesting diversity of both Therocephalians and Gorgonopsids and Dicynodonts. So it was a very diverse formation, which is quite cool. Included some very interesting, like Gorgonops is found there, Lycenops is found there as well, some very famous animals, Pyrrhosaurus as well. A very interesting assortment of early. I think that the Permian is actually so understudied. It's such an interesting time, but there's a lot of famous animals, some ones that are not quite so famous. Early Archosauromorphs lived there as well, some parareptiles, and very interesting formation. And the habitat it lived in was probably a floodplain, surrounded by a meandering river, and the river flowed from the southern mountains northeast to an alluvial plain, and every about 30,000 years the blanks were breached by flooding, which led to isolated pools. So they did kind of okay there in that regard. So yeah, quite cool, nice little Bulbasaur, even though it's a Dicynodont, they're more actually closely related to us than they are to dinosaurs, since they are synapsid. Yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see this little guy getting some love. You let them run off and do their thing. We always like to let them do their thing. Let's just let them run off. All right, next up, we've got Basilemys. So this is part of JoJo Chess's turtle pack, even though not all of them are turtles, as I get into, but this is part of the turtle pack. This one's actually a turtle. So this is Basilemys. Which is actually a really cute one. I'm definitely a big fan. And I like how it worked out well on the Dicynodont rig. So let's see if we can find one that looks in a pretty good spot. Use you. Why not? You look pretty. So you might, if you've played the game Soaring, you might recognize this guy. So Basilemys, which means king turtle in Greek, is a genus of large terrestrial Nocturnid-shelled turtle from the Upper Cretaceous of North and Central America. So this guy has been found in rocks during the Campanian and Maastrichtian, so between 84 to 66 million years ago, and was considered to be actually the largest terrestrial turtle of the time, which is quite cool. An analysis also made there was potentially one that was they were originally found in Asia, and then there was demonstrated that with Asian ones they gave rise to North American ones. Among Niolamia, which are a completely independent group of turtles, as we'll get into, they're actually considered to be most similar to tortoises, and have actually many paleontologists have believed to their behaviours to be quite similar to that of tortoises due to their terrestrial habits and eating tough plants. But they can be English distinguishable from other fossil turtles because of their really thick shells, the role of their tubular and their inframarginal scales and the reduced inframarginal scales, so there's quite a bit of ways to tell them apart from other turtles. And the fossil record is abundant with material from the shell, but cranial and cervical material is actually quite rare for this species. So in terms of its habitats, things like that, they were quite prominent. Turtles in the Cretaceous, and especially in the Upper Cretaceous, was doing actually quite well. And it was first found in 1924, where a partial skeleton and crushed skull of Basilemys was found by C.M. Cernberg in the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, but it was poorly described. In another part of Canada, there was another one found in the Frenchman Formation in Saskatchewan, and there's been more preserved ones found since. And the type species is Basilemys valoscona, but there are believed to be about 5 other species that have been found around the place. So some found in California, and some that have been described to Basilemys, the genus, but don't know exactly which species. But they've been found in the Dinosaur Park Formation, Horseshoe Canyon, Frenchman, Dinosaur Park, Hell Creek, Angela Formation, El Gallo Formation. So they're quite a widespread genus, which is quite cool. But yeah, they have a very interesting skull. So their skull is very similar to ancient genera of turtles like Artodus. Codus, I believe you say that. They had very enlarged or marginalized cheeks that were short and deep, very similar to, like, as I mentioned, like tortoises. So these would have been really good at eating plants and things like that. So that's kind of a way that great example of convergent evolution. And in terms of carapace, as I mentioned, there's a great way to tell them apart, and there's ways to tell them apart from different species of Basilemys by looking at the shell. I'm not going to get too much into that with you because this is just describing the genus. In terms of histology as well, they found 2 groups of Sten triagens, which is like stem turtles. So it was found that these guys have osteoderms, and the osteoderms are found to be elaborate sculpting patterns, which is quite interesting. And based on the specimens found on the cladograms, it suggested closest to the genus Niolamia and Zalugia, which is the closest examination shows it most closely related to them. So it is in that kind of very interesting group. So cryptodias, so I'll get to explain. So cryptodias, there's 2 groups, there's pleurodires and cryptodias of turtles. So cryptodias are the ones that pull their head straight in, and pleurodires are the side-neck turtles, which pull them to the side. So they were cryptodias, but the Niolamia is actually a group within the kind of Tribodias, so it was an extinct group, and it was kind of a really early one that didn't make it to the modern day, so it was a Cretaceous group. But yeah, still quite interesting animal. Do like to talk about these guys. So a great one from Jojo Chess, and I can't wait to talk about some of the other ones that they'll be going on about in this turtle pack, because it's nice talking about turtles for a change. But yeah, we'll let them run off and do their thing, of course. So next up, we've got Niolamia, which is a megalonid. That's a cute one, and it's got a very interesting skull shape, as you can see. So you can find one that's one. I like this one. This one screams to me as being quite a cutie. Let's see if we can get a good posture. That's better. All right, so this is Niolamia. So these guys are an extinct genus of South American megalonid turtle, which has quite a long and complex history, as we'll get into. So, like its relatives, you can see it's got this very robust and heavily built, very robust turtle. So it is related to things like tortoises, which we'll get into. But it has, you can see these very large horns on the head there, and encased by rings of bone. And this heavily build may have served to be between intraspecific combat, so competing against each other, like reindeer or other types of deer and antelope pushing against each other. So it may have been for that, or though there may have been more of a display function. And scans suggest that these guys would not had a great, they had a great sense of smell, but had only low frequency hearing, so they would have been using more chemical signals, like modern turtles, to kind of communicate. So in terms of its history and naming, so in 1898, British paleontologist Arthur Smith Woodward actually sent a photograph of a megalonid tail to fossil collector Centeno Roth, who worked under Francesco Pasco Moreno, who discovered them in early 1899, and then compared it to the tortoise Mealonia platyceps, which was found in Australia by Richard Owen, and compared them, so they seem to be related to each other. So they had a few expeditions and things and found them and found the holotype and then had a look at more of them. So it's got a very interesting history. And they was originally just considered one of the members of Niolamina, and it was considered Meolamna. And then it was considered a synonym, but Niolamina then was erected as its own genus when it was found it was actually quite distinct enough. And in terms of its age and everything, so the locale that they found it first, and it was in the Chubut province, and it has a mammal fauna, so it seemed to be most likely during the Eocene or Oligocene, so it's older compared to a lot of the other species of megalodon turtles, because most of them are actually from a lot of the ones that we have are actually much more recent, so even like Holocene age and Pleistocene age, so it's definitely an early one. So around the Eocene Oligocene is kind of aged. But we do have pretty good specimens of this, so we do have a pretty preserved skull, and you can see its skull is highly ankylosed, which means it's a lot of its bones are fused together. And you can see it's got this very interesting, kind of crest going along the back here. And it's very interesting. It also has a long-lated volutum nasi, which is only seen in turtles that have been used had snorkel-like noses, things like pick-nosed turtles, martamanas, and soft shells. That's very interesting as well. Because he's got multitude horns, which makes it a very interesting look. I'll actually have a look at the front for you. So you can see it's got very big horns there as well. And postcrania is actually known from quite a few postcranial remains. And while no complete shell is known, you're able to determine the shape. And although the largest fossils of them are flattened, this is believed to be because of taphonomy, so how kind of rocks move the skeleton or the fossil as it's in the rock, but it's actually believed to be much thicker. So it is a dome shell like modern tortoises as well. So they seem to have a pretty big shell there. The carapace length has been estimated for Niolamina based on shell fragments and based on proportions of the related Megalochelys, which is a lot larger. It's estimated to be about 1.2 meters, or just about under 4 feet, but I mentioned this is not certain, so they could be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. And you can see there, so that's probably about just over a meter, so potentially 2 or 3 meters long is probably what you'd see for the size of them. And like other Megalodons, you can see they're also covered, their tail is covered in a series of bony rings, very reminiscent of things like Nodosaurs and Ankylosaurs, so they're almost like the Ankylosaurs of the Cenozoic, which is pretty cool. You can see they're roughly hexagonal in shape, and they've got the big spikes down there. And unlike Megalona and more like Neogemis, actually was fully formed. The tail rings of these were fully formed and lacked the open underside that the more derived species like Megalonia had. So yeah, another really, really cool one there. So in terms of its phylogeny, actually consider this animal, or the South American one, is actually considered to be in the same position relative to Megalonoturnals, which is at the basal member of all Australasian taxon. But placement is consistent where it appears at time of place, because this genus is older than all the named species from Australia and the West Pacific Islands, and the bridge between Niolamina and the physically much different Megalonia is from Niogemis, which is typically represented as the most basal of the Australian forms of these guys, and share multiple traits and things like that. So it is considered quite basal. It's one of the more basal members of the family Megalonidae, and is like the kind of the first member, the basalmost member, because you do have Megaloniformes, which are earlier animals, and the Megalonidae is the family, and kind of comes in, and then you have things like the more modern, like Neogemes, and obviously we mentioned the Megalonia platyceps. But what's very interesting as well, this animal is quite important in the history of Megalonids, which is a really cool group of turtles. It provides insight into their paleobiogeography, big word there. So it's actually found in Neogene North of South America, which is in contrast with most of its family, which are found in Neogene and Quaternary Australia. And for over 100 years, it was the only form found outside the region of Australia, or Australasia, because it is found on islands of Australasia, until the discovery of Japhania, which I believe is found in, Patagonia. So it's another South American one. So the presence of the two genera marks the part of the Austral biogeographical kingdom, which includes southern South America, Antarctica, South Africa, Australia, Tasmania, New Zealand, and New Guinea. And we know New Zealand had Megalonids through the St. Barthen's fauna, so that's something for my local paleontology. We do know that Megalonids did live in Zealandia, or early New Zealand. And these animals would have been heavily broken up or with the they would have been quite affected by the breakup of Gondwana. And the Mahelonids were primarily Gondwanan. At the point, they may have actually potentially, rafts and things like that, but they may have dispersed through Patagonia into South America and then got out. And the cause of extinction of Niolamia and other South American Megalonids may have been because of gradual cooling in the drying climate of the Middle Eocene. And while Australia was still quite dry, it may have been kind of, like a holdout for them, since most of these older taxon are from South America and the youngest ones are from Australasia, which is quite interesting. And they would have got through Drake's Passage and things like that and may have dispersed while they already got extinct there. So they just managed to move to a place that was more reminiscent of their preferred habitat, which was Australia. So in terms of its paleobiology, there's actually a few studies that look into their lifestyle, but some studies that have been looking to their anatomy and things like that. It's found, as I mentioned, that snorkel-like snout. But also there's been an interpretation of living life in deserts with extant lizards, which makes sense. It is for thermoregulation as well. There's also the possibility that it would have been used for vocalization or thermoregulation, like in dinosaurs, but has been not really dismissed. They shown they have quite good senses, like smell, and you would have used chemical secretions like musks and cloacal secretions like modern turtles to communicate with each other. And as I mentioned as well, the inner ear suggests they were rather conservative, so they would have been listening to deep sounds, low frequency sounds, so they may not have been vocal very much, but interesting as well. And as I mentioned, we talk about the horns, very big horns. They would have potentially used them for headbutting. There's been suggested. Either thinking they had been headbutting, locking them, or things like that, and looking at the stresses, it seems to be they would be large enough to protect their neck. So it could have been something like that. And the impacts using the forehead were less stressful, so they potentially and there's a lot of absence of pathologies in the holotypes, so they may not have been headbutting, but they may have been using it for some sort of display structure. And what's cool as well, we do have ontogeny, so we do know what baby ones look like. There was a holotype of animal called Cryodrakon, which actually now considered to be a juvenile Niolamia, and it actually shows a few changes for what they went through against adulthood. So the baby ones had much smaller horns, and then they kind of grow as they get older. So that's quite cool. Yeah, really, really cool. Niolamia, very, very cool turtle, and I love talking about the megalonids. Really, really cool animal. So we'll enjoy them for a bit. I love talking about different animals and stuff. We got the turtle pack, very, very awesome. So let them run off, do their thing, of course. And then we've got our second to last animal of the turtle pack. I just want to make sure these guys are actually out of the way so it doesn't block the block the thing there. They seem to do that a lot. They just get a little bit annoying. There we are. So this is Megalochelys. Very, very cool animals. This Megalochelys, which means great turtle, is its name. Let's see if we can find one that looks pretty good. We'll have a look at you. I like the posture that you've got. Very Toraton, if you like Future as Wild, which I do quite like that show. Megalochelys, or the Great Turtle, is an extinct genus of tortoise, which was lived from the Miocene to the Pleistocene. So it's not just a species, there's multiple species within that genus, we'll get into. They are also noted for their great sizes. So the largest known of any tortoise, they would have had a maximum carapace in the largest species, which is M. atlas, would have had a length of over 2 meters, and their genus ranged from western India to Pakistan to as far east as Sulawesi and Timor, that the island specimens are likely different species, or distinct species, which may have been actually dwarf species, as we get into. So one species, the one that's described here most likely, because it is the biggest, M. atlas, is the largest known turtle, or large tortoise, with a shell of about 2 meters, or about 6'7" in length being recorded, and popular weights for this taxon have been as high as 4,000 kilograms, or 4 tons. The base in some more recent ones is about a ton, which is still much larger than modern, like Aldabra and Galapagos tortoises. Still much bigger than them, so it is the largest known tortoise. But there is island species that are considerably smaller, such as the Philippine species Sordani, which is only about 70-90 centimeters in length, with the carapace length of over 70-90 centimeters, or about just under 3 feet. And the shell is actually quite prominently domed and wide, and large opening for its limbs, but also relatively thin, which is quite interesting, though its epiplastron, which is the frontal part of the lower carapace, was actually forked and very thick, very similar to sulcata tortoises, and would have been used for combat between males. And the skull of Megalochelys grew over 30 centimeters in length, and they had a deep nasal snout, deep and snout more similar to things like Aldabra giant tortoises, which is quite cool. So in terms of its taxonomy, as I mentioned, they were first found in 1837 by Hugh Falconer and Paul Calby in the Savaki Hills of northern India, and was really named the species Megalochelys sylvestris. However, in 1844 it was actually decided to rename it to Colossochelys atlas, but as the original name did not show the size. But then it was lumped into Testudo, and then Geocalicine, which is the genus of modern, sulcata tortoises. And today, Colossochelys is considered a senior genus of Megalochelys, and the original species known Manubium, because it obviously lacked the standard, so it's M. atlas now, and though some argue for it as well. But there are a few different species described. So M. atlas is this large one. It's from the late Miocene to early Pleistocene of India, Thailand, and Myanmar. The other species from late Pleistocene India, which has been Manubium. Some other species from the Philippines and Java and Flores would have lived with small, pygmy humans and dwarf stegodons and things like that. But actually, it's a good example of a dwarf species, which is quite interesting. But classical cladistic analyses suggest that these guys would have been closely related to modern Cetochelys, which is the African spurred tortoise, and then with both being closely related to Geochely, which are the star tortoises. So they are more closely related to things, as I mentioned, like the African spurred tortoises, or sulcata tortoises and the Burmese star tortoise, things like that, rather than the giant tortoises that live today, which are completely unrelated to each other. And there were so many more giant tortoises throughout the Pleistocene and Pliocene that lived on the continents as well, so they did quite well. So the extinction of the species is quite interesting. It is actually suspected to have gone extinct due to the Homo erectus, due to its staggered extinction on islands, actually correlating with the arrival of Homo erectus within these regions, as well as evidence of them being exploited by Homo erectus. So it's believed to be, this could be one of the first extinctions caused by humans, because they did use them. They're very big and slow, easy to catch and kill. And then you also eat the eggs. They lay so many eggs, and then it's easy to grab that. But this genus was largely sadly extinct by the early Pleistocene, but lived in Timor into the middle Pleistocene, and potentially into Java and Flores, into the middle of the late Pleistocene. So yeah, quite a cool one there. Definitely a big fan of that. Really, really cool big guy. So that's Megalochelys done. So these three tortoise species, Basilemys, Niolamia, and Megalochelys, all done by JWE2, by the Turtle Pack, which I obviously put in. But this last one is technically not a turtle, but we'll get into that anyway. So this is Henodus, which is a really, really cool one. So here is our little guy here. Let's see if we can find one in the light. We want one in the light. We want one in the light. There we are. There's one in the light. Look at this cute guy. So this is, as I mentioned, Henodus. So Henodus is not a turtle, it's actually a placodont. So it's actually more closely related to plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs than it is to true turtles. So taxonomically it does not fit in this pack, but it is a great example of convergent evolution, having evolved a turtle-like shell. So we'll allow it, but we'll carry on. So Henodus is a placodont from the late Jurassic, from the early Carnian. Fossils have been found in Germany, and is about 1 meter in length, in carapace length, you could say. And the single species is Chelops. And it's the only placodont actually found in non-marine sediments, so it potentially lived in brackish or freshwater lagoons. So Henodus, like many other placodonts, you can see has a very superficial reference to turtles. And like turtles, it has a shell formed from a plastron on the underneath, so under is the plastron. Same with turtles as well, so the plastron is the bit on the bottom, and then the carapace is the bit on the top, covered by bony scutes and individual plates. However, its shell was actually comprised of many more pieces of bone and much more of a mosaic pattern. So you can see, we'll actually compare, we'll go back to our turtles here. So you can see the turtles and tortoises here, they've got much bigger osteoderms there covering up the part there, but these guys have much smaller ones. Let's see if we can find you there. Where are you? So you see it's got much smaller holes there. You can see much more, much more osteoderms and things. Much more very square animal. It's really cool. Do quite like Henodus. Let's see if we get a good pose for you. Well, they will give you like this. Why not? The arm was also fused to its spine, like turtles, and its limbs were situated in normal posture, unlike the turtle, which is located in the rib caves. And the weak limbs of Henodus suggests it's been pretty much no time, if any time, on land. It also has a single tooth on each side of its mouth, though it is thought the remaining teeth was replaced by a beak. And it seems actually these guys would have had baleen-like denticles along the jaw, and with combination of the unique feature of the hyoid, or the hyoid bone, which is your throat, and musculature actually indicates these guys may have been able to close their jaws quite rapidly and live like a filter-feeding kind of lifestyle. So that's quite interesting. And the head is also squared off at the front just to hide the eyes. So you can see this cute little head there. It looks quite cute. I'm definitely a big fan of this little cutie. Look at that little guy. Very cute. Anyway. So most recently, however, it has been suggested this Placogon was a aquatic herbivore, scraping off vegetation from the bottom with its broad jaws. And it actually has been brought up with another species called Entopidentatus, which was another reptile that was formerly suggested to be a filter feeder, and has very similar adaptations to Henodus, but is now found to actually be plant eater. So these guys could potentially filter feed to obtain plant material, but either filter feeding or a herbivore works for these guys. But yeah, not a turtle, but still a really cool animal to have. I love Henodus. Really great to talk about it, and a really cute little guy. Especially, I do think he's a cute little guy. So yeah, we'll let them run off and do their thing, of course. So next up, we've got Leaf and Luca, who has remade. So this is one back from the OG days of the first parts. They've actually gone back and made a more scientifically accurate Helicoprion cosmetic. So I'm going to go through that with you guys. I'm not going to go too much because I've already discussed Helicoprion in a few different, episodes before, and I've discussed it before. But I'm going to go through the anatomy because this one's much more accurate. So let's have a look at Helicoprion. So here we are. Let's see if we can get one in a good posture. This one actually might be good. Yeah, that one looks good. So this is Helicoprion, which is an extinct genus of shark-like eugenodont fish. So it's a Cryodrakon, so it is a cartilaginous fish, but it's more closely related to things like chimeras than it is to traditional sharks. Which is quite interesting. But it gives a great example of what we think it actually would have looked like now. So the original reconstruction is like, what the hell is this tooth wall? It basically looks like a shark with a spiral in its mouth. But actually looking at the anatomy, you can see it looks much more, like a chimera. And I could say probably a little bit more like a shark as well with this reconstruction. But anyway, it was quite a big animal. They got to about, 8 meters long. I think it's some of the estimates, based on its size, and there's a few different species as well. And this is based on the latest interpretation, or the latest reconstructions of the species. One specimen, it's even like 11 meters long. So basically, like the size of an orca or bigger. So quite big animals. But instead of having that really awkward tooth wheel, that tooth wheel is actually completely all in there. I don't know if we've got one with an open mouth, but that tooth wheel would have been in there, completely covered by flesh, not sticking out so weirdly. And that was actually believed to be a very interesting adaptation to eat things like ammonites and belemnites and nautiloids that were in shells. So how it's interpreted that the tooth wheel kind of would be able to open, and they could grab it and then kind of pull the soft part out of the shell. So actually, it's believed to be anatomically or like ecologically much more like a sperm whale, specializing, on those softer animals, which is quite interesting. So they believed that these guys would have, yeah, as I mentioned, like living compared to like sperm whales or like Cuvier's beaked whales or Rizzo's dolphins, and kind of being much more squid-like. And the mouth would have been closed. You could see it would have fit in the pocket in the jaw, and then open it and pull it out. And its ecology, as I mentioned, is compared to modern kind of soft eating cetaceans like whales, sperm whales, pygmy sperm whales, dwarf sperm whales, Rizzo's dolphin, things like that. Specifically feeding on those softer prey. And because they were eating on these soft fish and squid, they had reduced dentition, and these that jaw would have been great at like grabbing, potentially a ammonite and ripping out the soft part of its body out of the shell. So that's kind of its anatomy, which is quite interesting and gives us a great idea. It can see that much more traditional shark-like face, and not that weird monstrosity that the original one was. So it's very much more accurate to the anatomy, and fits it much better. And you can see much bigger as well. It's 11 meters long, quite big animal. So yeah, finally we got a scientifically accurate cosmetic. So you still need the original one to make, but it's to make this, so you need to release it. So you've got the original mod done by Leaf and coded by Leaf. This is a cosmetic, so you have like this is the traditional one, then you have the old one as a cosmetic. Which I think is still cool, so you can have the best of both worlds. But this is a scientifically accurate, or as much as we know, because being a cartilaginous fish, cartilage is nowhere near as good at preserving than bone. So this is pretty much the best that we have, or the most recent and probably most likely interpretation of Helicoprion and its tooth will, based on the evidence we have of close relatives and things like that. So yeah, really, really cool. And it's a great example of convergent evolution as well, because even though it is closely related to things like chimeras and ratfish, you can see its body very much looks like a shark, laminid shark, so it looks like a great white shark or a mako, and potentially basking sharks, because it actually reaches the same kind of size range as a basking shark. It's a great example of convergent evolution. So even though it is most closely related to modern chimeras, it has a body that looks much more like a shark or a swordfish or a tuna. Since they were having the same ecology, these guys would have been apex predators in the ecosystem, eating more soft prey. So yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see a accurate Helicoprion in Jurassic World Evolution 2. So yeah, we're going to let you run off and do your thing. And last but not least, for our aquatic animals, it's nice to get a lot of aquatic animals and flying animals today. We have got Thalassotitan, or the Titan of the Seas, done by Danbury, who did a great job. So let's have a look. Have a look at you there. How pretty are you? Well, I think I should look at the other one. I quite like the other one a little bit more. So this is Thalassotitan. We'll let you swim out a little bit more. What do you get out of there? There we are. Perfect. Perfect posture. So this is Thalassotitan, or Titan of the Seas. So this is an extinct genus of large mosasaur that lived during the late Maastrichtian, so is found in the latest Cretaceous, so lived at the end of the dinosaurs. Is known from what is now Morocco, and lived about 67 to 66 million years ago. The only known species is Thalassotitan atrox, which is described in 2022 from the Olden Albdun Formation, and initially it was identified as a genus of species of mosasaur or prognathodon, but now it's described as its own genus, which is quite cool. And if you know that formation, that's where all of those really cool pterosaurs come out, like Teethy Draco and Phosphodraco and things like that, and those kind of really cool late Cretaceous, pterosaurs. Hypothetical specimens have been found out the corners of the world, but it's possible they actually come from different taxon. But it's believed to be related to Prognathodon and the group Protechognathae. And what sets it apart is got its very massive jaws and quite robust teeth. And Thalassotitan was one of the largest known mosasaurs, being about 9 to 10 meters in length. and it showed that they definitely evolved to take over that large apex predator niche that was in the oceans during the late Cretaceous, which is now filled by orcas and sharks, and heavy tooth wear on its teeth, and were found in the vicinity of the holotype, but Asselware suggests they would have a diet eating smaller mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, large fish, and potentially sea turtles, so having big, robust jaws to eat big, hard things. So it is mentioned found in the older Obdam basin of Morocco, which has actually found quite a few interesting vertebrates, both aquatic and aerial, during the Maastrichtian stage of the Upper Cretaceous. And in 1952, carried out a broad survey. This was actually found to be a mosasaur taxon. And then it was referred to Dinosaurs, and then it lately would have become Thalassotitan. So a lot of things that were originally considered the same genus are now being split into different things, and described in 2022 by Nicholas R. Longrich as a new genus and species of mosasaur, which is Thalassotitan arctos. And the genus name Thalassotitan basically means the sea titan or the sea giant, and Atrox means cruel or merciless, so it's basically the merciless sea giant or the sea titan, which is interesting. Though all fossil remains attributed to Thalassotitan are from this the Adilabdon basin, there's believed to be potentially other teeth or other genera that could be found that could be of the species or other genera, and they actually found teeth actually quite similar to those of Thalassotitan in the North Carolina, in the USA, in the PD formation. So yeah, quite a large skull, and like other relatives, like other prognathodontids, they had very large skulls that were blunt and robust with very powerful teeth that were large and conical, very similar to things like Prognathodon saltatore, although they would actually been slightly stockier. So this is believed to be because they were specialized on eating hard prey. And in terms of postcranial skeleton, it's actually not well known, but it's believed the body was quite similar to those of other mosasaurs, so potentially something quite, bulky and things like that, which is cool. And as I mentioned, it is a member of the Prognathodonti tribe in the mosasaurine subfamily. So morphologically, it's more similar to things like the giant mosasaurs, Prognathodon curry and Satrator, and actually is a unique clade. So it's and it's found actually that Prognathodon is actually not monophyletic, so it's actually potentially Prognathodon is a waste bucket taxon. So there's lots of species in there that could be their own genus. However, there's suggested there's a high degree of convergent evolution in these mosasaurs. So some species that are completely underrated, maybe outside the genus. So very interesting. Thalassoarcton fits pretty much right in the middle of the Prognathodon, genus. So that means it's paraphyletic. So that means to be new genera described, or it needs to be lumped into Prognathodon. So I think, with considering how many species Prognathodon has, it most likely will be split into other genera in the future. So yeah. In terms of its habitat, though, it's a very interesting habitat, a very diverse habitat in Lake Maastrichtian. There are lots of bony fish and lots of cartilaginous fish like Cetolamna, Squalocorax and things like that. Also lots of marine reptiles, things like globidens and carsodens, labmasaurs like Zephyrosaurus, the graveloid crocodilian Osprasuchus. And it would have been potentially a apex predator ecosystem feeding on plesiosaurs, turtles, and large fish. And in the skies, they may potentially eat a lot of pterosaurs, so things like Phosphatodraco, Alicone, Barbadactylus, and Tethedraco. And there is some dinosaurs actually known from the formation as well, where it would have been an island system. So there's like dwarf hadrosaurs and abelisaurs from that formation, which is quite interesting. And it also would have lived with other species of giant mosasaurs like Prognathodon, Mosasaurus, Kinajara, and Galvamimus, which is quite interesting. So yeah, quite cool. And as we mentioned, it may have lived in North America as well, so all teeth very similar to the species. So yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan of that. Definitely a cool guy. So we're going to let them swim off and do their thing. So Danbury did obviously a great job. I'll be finishing off with a pterosaur for a change. So let's have a look at a really cool pterosaur. We've got this Starkid. We have got Cryptodrakon, or not Cryptodrakon, not Cryodrakon. I keep saying Crypto because Cryptodrakon is a genus, but this is Cryodrakon, done by Trippy28. So we've got here Cryodrakon, which is name means cold dragon. So this is Cryodrakon. Let's see if we'll have a look at the other one there. He looks nicer. I like the colours on this one. Or Cryodrakon. I keep getting them mixed, but this is Cryodrakon. Let's have a look at this cool guy. He's very pretty, isn't he? Very pretty guy. So this is Cryodrakon, which means cold dragon. So this is a genus of a starkid pterosaur, so it's related to things like Helicoprion and Quetzalcoatlus. Comes from the late Cretaceous of Canada and contains a single species, Cryodrakon borealis, and is recovered from the Dinosaur Park Formation. So since 1972, there have been bones of large starkids being reported from Alberta, and the first plesiosaur fossils, pterosaur fossils found in Canada. They were originally referred to as a species Quetzalcoatlus, but then Michael Habib, who is quite a notorious researcher for pterosaurs, but also, he's a zookeeper as well, was likely to represent this new taxon, and in 2019 the type species Cryodrakon borealis was described by Habib along David Willem Elliott, Hone, and Frank Cordes Theron, and the genus name derives from Cryos, which means icy cold, and Drakon, which means dragon, and the specific name belonging to borealis, so it is in the northern, or that's, from the northern areas. And Habib actually was originally considering calling it Cryodrakon virusin, which is a reference of the ice dragon in Game of Thrones, but then it's borealis. The holotype itself was found in the layer of Dinosaur Park Formation, dated to the late Campanian, between 76 and 74 million years ago, with the excavation site being located near the lower and older boundary. And the specimen is actually a partial skeleton, that's the skull, but it has 4 cervical vertebrae, rib, humerus, a pterygoid bone, the 4th metacarpal, a tibia metatarsus. In 1992, this skeleton was excavated from the quarry. In 1995, it was actually reported and partially described. And then actually now it's kind of been found. It's the only pterosaur skeleton actually described and found from Canada. So that is quite cool. But there is also much more other material that have been found of starkids in the Dinosaur Park Formation, so whether that belongs to Cryodrakon, potentially other species, as we know there potentially were multiple species of starkids living in America. Whether that we don't know, but it's still quite interesting. And it was described in 2019, yes. The materials included this guy was varying sizes, so there were some vertebrae that were not very big. They were a juvenile animal with a wingspan of about 2 meters, but the holotype is actually suggested to be quite similar in size to Quetzalcoatlus, or Quetzalcoatlus lawsoni, which is the smaller species. It's believed to be about 5 meters long, but there are a 5 meter wingspan, but there's believed to be other specimens that actually rival Northopi, which is the big 10 meter wingspan specimen, and had wingspans of about 10 meters or 11 meters, so up there with Quetzalcoatlus, or pretty much meeting that in size. So most of the specimens, they range from, small to big, so there's potentially, the biggest ones were rivaling Quetzalcoatlus in size. It seems to be quite similar proportionally to Quetzalcoatlus and other ones of other starkids, of those long-necked variety, though it may have been slightly heavier. And the way to tell them apart from other starkids is by 2 features of the neck vertebrae. So there are some small holes and things that actually use to tell them apart. In terms of its classification, though, it has been placed in Archosaurinae. It's actually thought to be one of the oldest starkids known from North America. And in 2021, they put a phylogenetic analysis of Quetzalcoatlus, which included Cryodrakon. And it was thought to be related to things like Megalochelys, Quetzalcoatlus, Helicoprion, and Arabornia, which is a group of quite large starkids. So it's up there with those really big ones, Helicoprion, Arabornia, and Quetzalcoatlus. So it was up there with the big ones, and it is actually quite later in the trees, which is quite cool. So paleobiology. So this guy was capable of flight and would have been one of the largest flying animals known to have existed on Earth. And a starkid pterosaur similar to Cryodrakon are currently thought to be hunting small animals with an ecology very similar to modern-day marabou storks, either scavenging or feeding on small animals. And in terms of paleo-environment, the Dinosaur Park Formation, where it's been found, is a very much well-known formation, which is a coastal plain and alluvial setting, so very hot and humid and high humidity and everything. It would have been a very diverse formation filled with lots of herbivorous dinosaurs, things like hadrosaurs, both Lambeosaurian and Saurolophine and Lambeosaurs, Centrosaurines and Chasmosaurine Ceratopsians, and Nodosaurs and Ankylosaurs. And also would have lived with lots of theropods and tyrannosaurids as well. And we actually do have a partial skeleton, which is actually believed to be scavenged by Dromaeosaur, potentially Saurornitholestes, Langostoni, and a broken tooth was found on one of the bones, which, according to the authors, means the thin-walled bones have also been very tough, so managed to, break the tooth of a dinosaur. So it shows that even though it's hollow, doesn't mean they're not strong. They weren't fragile, they were just very strong birds. Very strong animals, very strong bones. But yeah, this is Cryodrakon, so it's really nice to get another species of a starkid, another cool starkid in the game. I do love a lot of these species, really, really cool. So yeah, great one to end off on. So we'll let them fly off and do their thing. So you can see them in there. So yeah, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Trippy. I want to thank that one glitch, Jojo Chess, Leaf, Luca, and Danbury, giving us all these really wonderful mods. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.